joining us in August when we don't normally have a meeting, and go through a couple of things. First thing, just following the agenda a little bit, is to take a quick vote. It has to be a voice vote individually on the agenda, followed by the consent agenda. So on the agenda, approving the agenda, I'm voting aye. Emily?
Aye.
Emily, aye, okay. Barbara?
Aye.
Sharon, I'm sorry, excuse me, I took my glasses off. Sharon?
Aye.
Okay, Brent?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Garrett?
Aye.
Okay, Janet?
Aye.
And Gail? Oh, did we not? Yeah, we've got Gail. She's there. She's just muted.
She's muted.
Okay, Gail, once you've unmuted, we'll get your vote on that one. We're going to move on to the consent agenda with the same roll call. So I'm voting aye. Emily?
Aye.
Barbara?
Aye.
Sharon?
Aye.
Brent?
Aye.
Okay, Chris?
Aye.
Garrett?
Aye.
Janet?
Aye.
And Gail?
Aye. Aye for both.
Aye for both. Thank you, Gail. Okay. We have, I'll start by mentioning Gail's so she's gonna, I'm sure, catch anything I do wrong, but good to have you with us, Gail.
Thank you.
Okay, let me ask real quickly, do we have any public comment periods? Scott, do you know of anybody on here?
David.
No comments during the public comment period? Okay. I'd like to go ahead and then just start, before we go into the reports, I'd like to welcome all of our new members. I just really appreciate this team that's come together. We had quite a few applicants, which was really a nice situation. And David, our outgoing governance chair, did a wonderful job of vetting everyone and really trying to put together a team that gives us the broad skill set that we really need to be effective as a library board. So thank you all for joining us, and thank you, David, for the work you've done in getting us to that point. I think it'd be nice, and we don't have a lot of time, and I try to keep the meetings on schedule as much as possible, but I'd like to quickly go around the meeting today, since we have lots of new members, and have quick introductions and briefly introduce ourselves. And I'll start telling you, my name is Bill Yates. I've been a Richmond area resident for almost 60 years. I've been a first district resident in the city for 35 years. I'm a small business owner. My wife teaches in a local parochial school with a large lower socioeconomic student base. I've got 2 grown sons, and I've been chair of the board for a bit over a year. Okay, so that sort of gives a brief history of me. Let me jump in. Let's see, why don't we just go in that same order? And Emily, you want to tell us a quick bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Emily Altman. I grew up in Henrico County and moved back to Richmond as an adult in 2013. I work for the Virginia Community College system. I'm a librarian. I'm a systems librarian, so I work mostly with the technology, enterprise technology that libraries use to manage positions and lending and electronic resources and that kind of thing. Let me see. I have a 2-year-old, and I have been on this board for 1 year.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Emily. Barbara?
Yes, my name's Barbara Burton, and I've been on the board. I'm getting ready to start my 2nd term. I have lived in Richmond for the past 50 years, and I live in the 3rd district, and I've been here for 40 years. I'm a retired social worker from Henrico County Social Services, and I think once I retired, I had a greater opportunity than before to be involved with the library.
Thank you, Barbara. Sharon, one of our new members. Sharon, you're muted right now, I think. Are you?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Now I can. Yep.
I was born and raised right here in River City. I am a twin, so if you see me and I don't speak, it's probably not me. I have two grown children. I come from a family of educators. My dad was a principal. I was a principal. Both of my children work for Richmond Public Schools. We're my whole family is invested in Richmond Public Schools and the city of Richmond.
Great.
That's me.
Thank you, Sharon. Okay, Brent?
I'm Brent Graves, born and raised in Richmond, Virginia. And basically went to, the only time I was not in Richmond, I was at Virginia Tech in college. I've got a degree in from the College of Architecture with a focus on construction. And just somewhat of a fun fact, my grandmother was a librarian at the main branch back in the 1950s and 1960s.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, and Brent, we're not going to hold the tech thing against you, so that's good that we got that out there. Okay. Christine?
I'm really awed by the longevity of so many of you. I just moved down to Richmond 3 years ago. I work for the Smithsonian, the National American History Museum. When I lived in Northern Virginia, I was on the board of the Fairfax Library and president of their Friends group and part of the foundation. So anytime I can get involved with the library, I am thrilled and delighted. So I've been on the board along with Emily and Janet for a year, and it's been the best year ever.
Thank you. Okay, Garrett?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Garrett Sawyer. I have been a resident of the city of Richmond for about 25 years, basically the majority of my life, it seems. I'm a proud resident of the 4th District, but I grew up in the 5th District of the city. I currently serve as the Vice President of Human Resources for a company called Way Forth. We do senior transitional services throughout the country. I'm super excited to join this. I actually have been very involved in politics in the city of Richmond for all my life. I even ran for city council in 2016. So anything that I can do to impact our residents in a meaningful way means a great deal to me. And I have to put in there, Brent, I actually am a Wahoo. So I won't hold that against you.
All right.
Okay,
great school.
Janet? Janet, you're muted.
I'm coming. I'm here.
Okay.
Janet Woody. I've been on the board for a year. I was born in Richmond. I live in the 4th District. I have 3 sons and a bunch of grandkids and 2 cats. And I'm a retired librarian. And I have a husband. He's standing over here and wanted you to know. And I've worked in academic, public, and special libraries.
Okay, thank you. And we're happy to have Paul there listening too.
Paul is here if you need
we know
a
him from reading him so many times. Thank you. Okay, and Gail.
Hi, good morning. I'm Gail Werner. I have been on the board before from 2008 to 2019. I went off a year ago, taking a little break, and I'm grateful that you asked me back. And I grew up in New Jersey, where the tomatoes are comparable in status to Hanover's. And I moved to Washington, and in 1986, my now late husband and I moved to Richmond, and have had such a wonderful experience here. I worked in law firms. I'm a librarian by profession and specialty in law, and then worked at Hunton and Williams, and then in 1998 transferred to the University of Richmond Law School Library, where I retired a couple years ago. And my experience on the board was primarily on the facilities committee, and then I served as chair from 2016 to 2018.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's jump right into the reports. And we'll start out with Is it Clay or Ruth that we have for the Friends report? We don't have either, it looks like. Scott, do we have any report from the Friends, or are we skipping that today?
For the Friends, we don't have any report. Ruth was tied up today, and Clay is still out on family leave.
That's fine. It's not a scheduled meeting. They wouldn't have expected a lot from them this month anyway. So, Karen, I think I saw was in at one point.
She's here.
I'm here. I do not have a report.
Okay, Karen, anything?
No report this time.
Okay, no problem at all. And then Scott, you are going to be the main attraction, it looks like.
Okay, in the board report, there was I have a written report that I submitted to y'all. Did you all have any questions on anything specifically there? I think Chris had a question in the beginning, so
I have a kudo to what Jennifer Duell is doing with RPS. I thought that was proactive. I love partnerships. Send her my high five. I thought that was excellent.
Yeah, I have a list of all of the things that the youth services team has put together in response to like all age groups from birth to 18. We are doing just tons of things. And really trying to coordinate with the schools who are scrambling to get it together to get their curriculum in. I will distribute this long list of things that we have planned for the fall to try and connect with the schools. And I'm going to put after our meeting, I'm going to put up a lot of the data and almost all the data that you're going to be presented with today. That staff have compiled the surveys and the data and this list of programs that are going to take off. But yeah, we have been working really hard while we've been in curbside. And I'm very proud of how we pivoted and evolved library service over the last 6 months. So, but I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about my report. I don't know if we want to move through the rest of the agenda. I can give you a brief report on finance, facilities, and governance, and then we can go back into unfinished business, which is that COVID-19 reopening plan. Does that sound okay, Bill?
Yeah, I think that's a good approach, and we recognize these can be short. A lot of that is skip anything that we're going to cover in the COVID report. So even circulation and stuff, I think fits into that other report probably.
Okay. So I'll start off with the facilities committee. We haven't met yet. We're still putting those committees together, but there has been action since we last met. The RFP for master planning that Gail started almost 2 years ago, we finally moved it forward for the third time. We have 16 proposals we're reviewing. And then on September 10th, we'll have an evaluation meeting where we determine who will move to the next level in the interviewing process. So we should hopefully be moving through this process this fall. I reported to you all that we had is there any questions on that before I move on? Okay. I reported that we had a vehicle crash into our library, our Hull Street library on August 14th. Ironically, the mayor was supposed to show up at like 20 minutes before this vehicle crashed into the building. It was somebody speeding down Hull Street. They T-boned a car in the intersection at 14th and Hull and then proceeded to crash into the building. Thankfully, no one was injured or killed because they were probably doing 50 or 60 miles an hour when they hit the building. Wow. So we had to close that location. We were closed all last week while we did a damage assessment and had an engineer and an architect look at the building to see how much damage was done. We did receive a certificate of occupancy so we could reoccupy the building, and we were able to resume services on Monday. We're not able to use the meeting room because the damage is located in that northeast corner of the building. So we are in process of getting the plans to repair it and hire a contractor to come in and repair all the damage. So I'm not sure how long that'll take, but they are moving forward, and the insurance is taking care of the payments for all of that, and we should have that back up and going. Other than that, we did have some flooding. The rain recently has, we had flooding at main library again. We had some backups in the storm sewer. So once again, the flooding returned to the main library. Special collections got flooded about twice. So the pandemic just keeps giving us gift after gift. But we think we have that under control and we'll just keep watching it. So under facilities, that's pretty much where we're at. The greening of RVA libraries, we had all of the charrettes in July and August, and we will have a meeting on Friday afternoon. We have a meeting with the landscape architect and the James River Association to review those plans and the results of what all those charrettes kind of produce. So I'll be able to report next month kind of where we're at in terms of the process of that. And I really appreciate Janet coming out and those of you who are able to attend some of the Zoom meetings to share information on that project. And I think that covers everything I have for facilities.
One quick thing on facilities, RFP responses came in. It sounded like a bunch of them.
Yeah, we got 16, which is the most we've ever had this is the third time we've tried. So this is 16, and there are many from a lot of reputable firms. So the committee that the city has established to evaluate and award the RFP, which is made up of Dexter Good from Special Projects, Cheryl Clark, who's our facilities superintendent. I think she's on the call. Natalie Draper, who's our main library, myself, and Kevin. Can't think of Kevin's last name right now. He's from the Office of Minority Business Development. He's also a participant on the committee. So we'll be reading through all of those proposals and narrow them down on September 10th for a round of interviews that should take place in October. So hopefully after those round of interviews, we may have a third interview. I'm not sure, but we want to try and find a firm that will best assess the building and move forward with the master plan for how we could renovate the main library.
Okay. And when we get to probably the first round of interviews after they've sorted it out, I know that city procurement doesn't give the board a vote, but I think we probably should have someone from facilities from the board sit in on those, and I think that is allowed. I hope.
Yeah, I'll double check that with the director of procurement and see if we can do that.
See if we can. So, okay, very good. I'm going to ask David to quickly talk about governance, just because he's generously stayed with us today for this, to explain a little bit about what that job does, so that we can be looking for someone next month who will volunteer to lead governance. David?
Because this is a group meeting, I don't want all of you all to respond at once after I describe this wonderful committee. Let me move you around so I can see what I put together here. Make sure you're not looking at anything. Oh, look, Scott, there's one for you. Okay, governance committee. Primary responsibilities would to track upcoming vacancies for our board. And when you're tracking those vacancies, we have to create a list of current and future board needs. You have some vision. Are we losing someone in finance and no one's in there? We need to look for someone in finance. Do we need somebody with facilities experience? I'm smiling at you new folks because several of you have that experience. You work with boards and commissions, which is our counterpart in the city government, to communicate our board recommendations to the council for appointment. This is very important. It helps if you're plugged in a little bit. When Gail was on and I was on years ago, basically what you see is what you get. Council sprinkled people in there without real regard for board needs. That has changed. We've changed that over the last 4 years. And it all starts with anticipating current and future needs. You help with the search for those candidates. You have to have familiarity with our board bylaws. I think most of you know that our library is in a rather unique situation in that there's only a few technically independent organizations in the city, the public schools, I think urban design, and the library. Keeping track with Gianna with attendance. She will provide you periodically with attendance reports. We had problems with attendance early on or years ago, and now our bylaws reflect that if you miss, all right, now I don't have my bylaws up, shame on me. X number of meetings in a row, it is mandatory release from board, from the board. You will help facilitate board officer elections. Each time they'll reach out to other board members in conjunction with the chair to see who has an interest and what would be a good fit for those positions. And that's pretty much it. I've put this together into some bullet points, and I will send that out for Bill to distribute to you all so you can think on that. I mean, nobody wants an off-the-cuff decision after my briefest of briefs. And that's all I have for you. Did I miss anything?
No, I think, David, you covered it well. We appreciate all you've done. I'll mention that we also have a finance committee as well as the governance, and we have a facilities committee. So we'll be looking, we have people on each of those, but we'll be looking at sort of distributing the new members on those and so on. David has also been our vice chair. So we are going to need to replace, have a new vice chair, and I mean, even the new chair if people choose that they'd like to do that. So I think that's one that is, those will be voted on, and then the others are more selected by the chair and vice chair based upon what you'd like to do. So thank you, David. And let's jump in. Scott, I think our next thing is to move on to the unfinished business. I have the only thing on unfinished, and I've got a couple of new business items, is the COVID-19 update status. And for the new members, I'd quickly like to say that we have, as a library, been trying to balance the safety of our staff, our patrons, public at large, with the needs of those of the patrons and the public, and trying to balance that with different ways that we can do it, and the different needs, even branch by branch we've talked about. Now, we went through the shutdown access, but no one coming in. We went to curbside pickup. We went to, and you'll see these in a minute, we went to fully open. Well, I won't say fully, but primarily, basically open. We had a couple of COVID scares as far as some testing, exposures, possible exposures. Fortunately, the testing's all been negative, which is a positive for us. And we, when we hit those exposures, the board voted last month to temporarily go back to curbside and have all the branches closed. So Scott has been compiling, and his staff have been doing a great job of pulling together information on what's going on in the library in our current status, circulation, other things. And I'm going to turn it over to Scott to run through that, and then we will, as a board, make a decision on where we want to go for the next month or two as far as level of service. Okay, Scott?
All right. Thanks, Bill. Let me just review briefly. I'm going to briefly review kind of the timeline. You've mentioned it, but I'm going to put some firm dates to it so y'all can know specifically when we closed and how this thing has kind of unrolled. We've been working on this for the last month since we last met, and I've asked staff to be here to help me present to you the information we gathered, the data we've gathered, the research we've looked into. So I have Tori Nunnally, she's our branch manager from Westover Hills. She's going to present a report that we put together on circulation, data, usage of our libraries. I have Adam Zimmerly, who's our branch manager at East End. He has helped us throughout this process, helps us run our Zoom meetings. He lets you in the meeting, and he's helped gather data on a staff survey, and he's been very involved with doing research. And then I have Natalie Draper. She's our manager here at the Main Library. She's responsible for all of our public services and operations here at Main. So it's a pretty big job, and she's been here the whole time helping us manage this pandemic pretty closely. All of my managers have been just fantastic in coming up with solutions and keeping things going while we pivot and evolve library services over the last 6 months. It hasn't been easy because this has been such a dynamic crisis, and there's no playbook for it. So we're just having to kind of take the information that's out there and what we're seeing and what we're hearing from you all and process it and then make the best decisions we can with that information. So let me revisit real quickly. March 13th to May 31st, we were shut down completely. That's when the city went into phase 1, and that was a complete lockdown. During that time, all of our library staff pivoted. We evolved library services. You'll see during that time, we launched new initiatives on our website. We added electronic resources. We had just, if you look at our data, we had very large increase in electronic library cards. So people were moving to us to get the resources that they once got in our buildings. So during that time, we were in phase 1 and we were shut down. Staff were doing professional development and training and really just supporting operations virtually as much as possible. Then the end of May, we shifted to phase 2. And that's when on June 1st, staff returned to our buildings. We kind of turned things back on. And then we launched curbside service on June 6th. And in curbside service during that period, we were really just trying to figure out how to deliver books across as safely as we can in this COVID environment and answer our patrons' questions and just keep things going. What could we do in that? At that time, we weren't doing faxing and printing, and it was something that we heard from during that time that people wanted. So we have added that in when we moved back to curbside. But on July 6th, that's when we moved from curbside into opening our buildings. And that was when the state moved from phase 2 to phase 3. And it really appeared that the information was pointing us to things were safe and we were able to kind of open up. And I kind of expected things to open up. And if this morning I was looking at the state curve and it looks like a letter M. So July 1, we're real low, and then all of a sudden everything started going back up. And that's what we discovered as well. Is we were doing everything right, but it just takes one person, one problem to get an exposure. And we are very short-staffed at this time. The city implemented a hiring freeze when we went into this COVID situation. So we had vacancies before the pandemic, and we couldn't fill those vacancies when we went into the pandemic. And then during the hiring freeze, it's been very difficult to get requisitions through to get positions hired. So we're functioning at a pretty, we have vacancies and we can't fill them. And then going into from fiscal year 20 to 21, we took about a 9% cut in our overall resources and operations and personnel. So it's been pretty difficult. So when we encountered the exposures that we had in early July, when we had confirmed exposures, we didn't have much choice but to shut a branch down because we didn't have redundancy in staff to allow us to backfill the positions that we were waiting on our employees who were in quarantine. And that happened at North Avenue and that happened at Hull Street. So thankfully, those exposures came back as negative results, but we still had to overcome that shutdown. So that's how we got to where we're at. On July 23rd, when we all made when the board made a decision to let us go back into curbside and figure out how to manage this crisis. So at that time, you asked us to gather data and do some surveys. And so the first survey we did was a survey of our patrons. And so I'm going to turn the floor over to Natalie Draper, who's our branch manager here at Maine, and she's going to briefly present the results of that survey and share with you what we discovered from it.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to attempt to share my screen here, so hopefully this works.
Not quite yet now. Oh, there we go.
Seeing it? Hopefully we all see the same thing. Okay, there we go.
Yep.
Forgive any typos, I put this together.
We're good.
Okay, so we have had the survey up live. It's actually still live now, but we've mostly gotten the responses I think that we need to get at this point. It's about 2 weeks. We've gotten feedback from around a little over 400 patrons. Something to keep in mind with the numbers is that since the survey was a little limited in distribution to being online. We weren't able to do the kind of paper surveys that we would probably normally do with patrons in the branch. So it really reflects patrons who have internet and computer access at home. So it's just something to keep in mind. This was posted to social media, library's website, Nextdoor, or email newsletter, and it was shared by folks who forwarded this survey around. So the demographics represented and respondents are more than 90% of the people who responded actually live in the city of Richmond, which I think kind of tells us that people are keeping it close to home, which makes sense. And the sizable majority of those who responded are over 18, mostly in the 18 to 59 range, as you can see on this in this slide, with few children in the home. As far as the questions related to our collections and borrowing habits, that, as you might expect, the vast majority of people who responded have a library card. Only 32% have had or currently have an e-card. I was a little surprised by the result on that, that only 7% of those who responded got an e-card after we closed. So we didn't quite catch all that, because we know that we issued a lot of e-cards after March 14th, that we didn't quite see them responding to the survey. So only 7% of those who took the survey got an e-card since March 14th. Most of the people who responded, I think, were our heavier borrowers and long-term users. The majority of these respondents use the library for e-resources and curbside checkout, as opposed to some of the other services that we asked about, like programming and printing and faxing, things like that. And the majority of the borrowers indicated that they really miss browsing the stack. 79% said that. And if we offered appointments to do so, they would like that. As far as the programming questions, the majority of those who responded that they do attend virtual programs prefer more interactive platforms like Zoom over more static like Facebook or Instagram Live or even YouTube, although quite a few people do like YouTube. Those respondents who like virtual programs would like to see more book clubs and more interactive programming, such as story times and author visits were specifically mentioned, which is something we're actually working on adding. The individual responses, when you go through, and I can post the link to the survey so you can actually read through some of these because they're pretty interesting, but they really miss our craft programs, and 38% say they miss interacting with staff. And the patrons who did take advantage of our take and make crafts offered at curbside really enjoyed those and would like to see more. Over half did express that they had safety concerns about using the library. And while 45% said that they didn't, everybody, as you can see from here, except for 2, so 402 respondents, checked something on this list. Only about maybe 14% didn't have any at all. So mask wearing was the biggest issue, and we saw that when we were open. So that tracks with the borrowers coming into use the library. For me, some of the key takeaways from this are questions that we didn't necessarily ask, which is that our heavy users are often still not aware of our hours, our programs, our collections, services. Some individual responses actually would describe a service that we do offer kind of clearly, like on the homepage, as something that they wish we had. So I think maybe doing a follow-up to this where we actually respond directly to those individual responses. We can't respond to the person because it's anonymous, but we can put something online like, you asked and we answered. And our ebook users do tend to visit a little bit more frequently, and they express that they would like to have more selection from us on ebooks. There were a lot of very passionate comments to that effect. I think that's it for me.
All right, thank you, Natalie.
Sure.
We will move on to Adam, who we did a survey of our staff because we wanted to assess how they felt coming back. Were we doing enough to keep them safe? Were our actions in the branches and our decisions the right ones? So that survey I'm going to turn it over to Adam.
Thanks, Scott. Good afternoon, everyone. So the staff side survey was a lot shorter. We asked effectively 6 questions. As Scott was saying, we were asking them questions about how they feel we've done as far as keeping them safe, how safe they feel. in the midst of the pandemic, as well as asking them a little bit about what they thought about for moving forward, what kind of models they would like to see, as well as how they feel about curbside, if they wanted to stay in curbside, move forward and reopen. So give me one moment and I will go ahead and share a quick little infographic with you here. And let's see, can everybody see it? All right. So I think it's important to note that, first of all, 2/3 of the staff who responded do work at branches. We had well over half the staff did respond. And as far as which model they were interested in, we've got 45% said that they would be interested in having Main reopen for some of the in-person service, but those branches remaining on curbside. We did have it sort of split as far as option number 2, as far as which branches would remain on curbside, who would reopen, but only 15% of respondents wanted everyone to open at the same time. There was a clear majority as far as whether they wanted to reopen fully or remain in curbside. You know, we've seen over the past, goodness, has it been about 6 weeks, 4 weeks that we've been doing this modified curbside, that in large part it's working pretty well. We're doing a lot of service through that, and especially with the modified and expanded curbside, we're meeting a lot of the needs. And I know Tori will get into that in a bit, but I did want to point out that it's been working really well and the staff see that. As far as how the staff feel things are going, we've got 65% did say that they felt that we did a good job with the PPE, with having the tape laid out on the floors, with having enough adequate masks for patrons. 65% said that yes, that was good for both in-person and curbside. But 33% said that they only felt that we had done enough in order to make it safe for curbside, for only curbside. But overwhelmingly, they do feel like their safety has been considered. We had a few people skip this question, but we had 17% or 17 people say that they thought that we had done a great deal as far as keeping their safety important. 12 people said that we had done a lot to make them safe. And we've got 80% are usually or always feeling safe currently at work. So again, a much smaller survey for the staff, but one that kind of gave us a snapshot as to how they feel things are going and how they feel about it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Appreciate that. So you've now seen survey from the patrons, survey from staff. Now, Tori has put together a report that's going to aggregate all of the data that we've gotten from our catalog and our service that we've collected over the last few weeks we've been open. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Tori, and she's going to share her report with you.
Okay, hi everybody. I hope everyone can hear me okay. I am the Library Community Services Branch Manager at the Westover Hills Library. And thank you guys for allowing me to speak today and present on behalf of the system and the staff. I'm hoping to give you guys kind of a snapshot of what's been happening with libraries across the state and what we've been doing here as a system, and then give you guys some ideas, recommendations, and thoughts that we've had through that research. So I will start sharing my screen and show you guys my PowerPoint. Maybe.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, now, fair warning, I sometimes speak very quickly, so please don't hesitate to jump in and ask questions or ask me to slow down. But without further ado, so looking at moving forward, I'm hoping to answer some of these questions that have been brought up in the last board meeting or two. At what point will we be able to open our doors or be business as usual? Are we currently meeting community needs? What needs are not being met? How do we work towards improving those conditions or meeting those needs? Are there quantifiable conditions that need to be met to do that? What does reopening the system or the branches, what do those procedures look like? So I started with the library systems in Virginia, And being librarians, I had several people on staff assist with this, and we dug deep. We found there's 92 library systems in the Commonwealth. Currently, we have 25 in curbside only, 50 that are allowing public entry with restriction, and 17 following some sort of hybrid model. Of the open branches, 15% of those branches have had to have branches closed due to COVID infections. We decided to dive a little deeper and look at the populations that these systems serve. So in trying to find like systems across the state, we looked at systems that are going to be reaching populations of 200,000, similar to Richmond. So we looked at those and we found that there's 12 in the Commonwealth. We have 6 that are in curbside, that includes Richmond. We have 2 that are allowing public entry at this time with restrictions, and they're following a sort of grab and go model. So get in, get out. And then we have 4 that are in hybrid models. They have some branches that are still closed, and most of them have a hub or a few branches operating in some capacity where the public can come in. So I think it's important when looking at these systems, the ones that are closer in size of service to our system, so you can see that we do have about 80-something% still doing some sort of hybrid or curbside option. We did call several of these systems and get some more specifics from them on how it was working, what they were doing, how many people they have on staff at a time. Every single branch is still offering curbside, whether they're open or they're closed. And I do want to note that because of our size staff, I don't think that that's going to be feasible for us. So I do want everyone to bear that in mind. And the branches that we did talk to, I spent the most time talking to Loudoun County and Fairfax County, which Chris, I think, has quite some familiarity with Fairfax's system. But what we found was they do have anywhere between 10 to 15 staff members at a time. And they are finding that the curbside option is still the most popular option, but they do have people coming in and using the computers or grabbing items. So just to give everyone kind of a picture of what's happening across the state right now, before we go into our system. So I wanted to just start with the numbers. I think you guys have the numbers ahead of time. I've kind of wanted to do a side-by-side comparison of these different phases and what services we offered and who we were reaching in relation to what we would do under normal circumstances. So we have phase 2 curbside. We have phase 3 open to the public. We have phase 3 modified curbside, and then also August of 2019's numbers. The difficulty with putting these side by side is they're different days. We were in phase 2 for 35. We were in phase 3 open to the public for 17. We were in the modified curbside now. At this point, when I did the data, it was 29 days. And then obviously August has 31. So we extrapolated that and we normalized it by dividing by the number of days and getting an average. So when we do that, you can see that and I also want to note, Hall Street and North Avenue have been adjusted for the actual days of service that they were open, so that we could get a better picture of what they were doing on average. But these numbers show what kind of, in relation to what a normal time would be, where we're at percentage-wise. So in looking at this chart, you can see that if August of 2019 is 100%, back in phase 2, we were hitting 16% of normal. And we discussed that. I saw you guys discussing that in the board meeting. I mean, we were at a fraction of a fraction. We had long hours where no one was calling in for curbside, and we knew that we weren't meeting community needs. When we opened to the public, we saw that jump drastically to about 64% of normal circulation in comparison to a regular August. In actuality, being in curbside, this modified curbside, offering additional services, getting the word out there through multiple channels, we're actually trending around 69% of what we would do in relation to August of 2019. And if you look at the chart on your left, you'll see the orange is what we were doing in that first curbside, very low all across the board. Some branches, you know, we're doing a little bit, but across the board, pretty low. When we were open to the public, some branches circulated a little bit more. When we closed in curbside, some branches circulated a little bit more that way. Overall, they're pretty neck and neck as a system. So then I wanted to talk about the additional physical services we're offering in this modified curbside. For anyone who doesn't know all the things that we're offering. Printing services are up to 10 pages a day. They can email us and we will print them out and bring documents outside. We are doing photocopying and scanning services. We're doing faxing services. We can do, of course, reference inquiries all day long, and we are doing that online and on the phones. We're offering readers advisory and concierge services across the branches. Lots of people have called in. I can speak anecdotally about my branch. I have a 6-year-old who's learning to read, but I don't know where to start, so I don't know what to put on hold. Can you help me? So we've been able to really kind of target those questions and help find materials and get those out to our patrons. Other things that we're doing are mask distribution, of course, soil sample kits, photo registration forms, things like that. And in adding these additional services, we've been tracking those numbers. We've actually assisted an additional 4,331 patrons during this phase 3 modified curbside, people that we were not assisting in that phase 2 curbside. And on top of that, because we have doors closed, we are able to divert some of our staff to other physical services, like putting together our teen book boxes, our crafty hour kits, our binge bags, our STEAM bags, which have been huge. And then I think Chris mentioned Jen kind of partnering with RPS. We've had several staff members be able to ride in the lit limo, which is something RPS is doing, taking books out into the community, being its own bookmobile and providing materials to areas of need. So those items added together have made another 1,710 kits or people assisted. So something around 6,000 additional people in the city have been able to use our resources physically in some capacity with this modified curbside. So I have this little pie chart to kind of just give a picture of what productivity with our staff is looking like daily. So you can see about 40% of our day is devoted to those holds pickups, people calling and we bring the books out to the table. The rest of the day is being devoted to other services that we're able to provide in the branches. We also did track notary requests because it has been something that's come up in the board meetings in the past. And we do have about 1% of the day across the branches, we do have people making notary requests. A lot less than I expected, but it is there and being requested. So because we are doing the modified curbside right now, we've been able to continue virtual programming. Some of the things we were already doing and have continued to do would be our Storytime Shorts, our Full Steam Ahead, Crafty Hour. We have these videos and tutorials. We still have the weekly RPL at Home newsletter that Adam is spearheading, and we're still gaining subscribers, and it has gotten very good feedback from patrons that have subscribed. They enjoy that. We've also got our Bunker Book Club, and we're adding in some various branch book clubs, the West End and my branch, the Westover Hills branch. We have book clubs that we've been able to do electronically, and we've recently acquired a Zoom account, which is going to open us up to being able to do more virtual programming on a smaller scale with our neighborhood and communities. We have Ripple's Reading Buddies. This is a program that I'm particularly proud of. I don't know how much we've discussed it in the board meetings, but briefly, it's a chance for children to sign up ahead of time and actually go one-on-one with a librarian and read to them and have them be assisted. And we've built some really great relationships with different children across the city who maybe just need a little assistance with the reading. It's very encouraging. They've really enjoyed that. So we're hoping to keep something like that going, but possibly modifying it to meet other needs as well. We also have some teen things that have been happening, teen trivia, teen advisory group, teen gaming programs. I know Adam's got a teen librarian who has done some really cool gaming things that's been happening. We launched Bookologist, which is a online form that you can do readers advisory requests like, hey guys, I just read this book. It was fantastic. I like books like this. I have no idea where to go next. What do I do? And so we will pick out books for you with the help of several staff members across the system, get them over to the branch and let you explore and discover some new people, new books. And then of course, Ask a Librarian is all day long. We set that up and we get questions all day long about various things and we can respond in real time live with staff members. So I hope I'm not going too quick. Any questions so far? No? Okay. Okay. So going forward, we have some reopening recommendations, and here's where we do the kind of the little bit more boring but important talk. May 12th, the World Health Organization did make a statement advising that before reopening organizations, you want to have a 5% or less percent positivity for at least 14 days. The CDC has stated that percent positive is a key metric in COVID spread suppression. It's by far not the only metric. There are obviously other things you would want to consider, but it is important to track percent positive in combination with the number of tests and keeping a 7 to 14 day running average. And then also I put in here, Johns Hopkins has done a study. They're updating their website daily about percent positivity being used as a COVID-19 indicator when per capita testing levels are stable over a period of time. They are calculating percent positivity slightly different than different departments of health across the states. They are looking at repeat tests and they are looking at level of testing in states. One of the faults in Virginia that I think everyone has acknowledged is that some days we test a large number of people and some days we test less. And so what we're finding with percent positivity, especially on smaller scale localities, is one day we could be at 9% and the next day we're at 6% and then we're back at 8% and then we're at 4%. And so there seems to be a lot of bouncing around. So it's hard to navigate percent positivity, which is why Johns Hopkins states that they have to do at least 14 days to get a better running average. And they've looked at the 50 states. They've recognized 32 as not being able to have that testing stable quite yet. So kind of what they're saying is you can't let percent positivity be your only metric for making decisions. But Virginia is currently still on the other side. We're still in the red on their study. So we're getting much closer. If you go on their website and look at it, much closer to having stable testing, but we are not quite there yet. So what does all that mean? Looking on the smaller scale, the recommendation to the board would be before moving to our next phase of services, hoping that we could get a 5% positivity or lower for 14 days per that World Health Organization recommendation. I did do a screenshot of the Virginia Department of Health's percent positivity for Richmond. This is a few days ago. And this is a 7-day running average. They are not currently doing a 14-day average. The 14-day average for the city right now is right around 6.6%. It is important to note that we do serve Henrico and Chesterfield primarily along with Richmond. So I have included their percent positivities just to give everyone a picture. Henrico's around 6.8% and Chesterfield's right around 7%. So that makes the 14 running day average in the greater Richmond area currently at 6.8%. And it is important to note that VDH's data is always 4 to 5 days behind. So at the bottom there, if you look at the dates, this only went through the 18th of August. So even though they update daily, the information that they're updating is always about 4 to 5 days behind. I didn't make it actually, someone else made it for me, but this is a percent positivity graph, just tracking the different areas, Richmond, Henrico, Chesterfield, and our regional average. I will note, I do think it's important to note, Richmond recently had a spike in the number of tests that they were doing in the region, which is arguably part of the reason why percent positivity has been so much lower with the schools returning. They have done a lot more testing and repeat testing. So like they said in the Johns Hopkins study, those numbers are still going in with VDH. Just want to make sure I note that. So looking forward at step-by-step service recommendations, the main thing that we know we're not offering right now is access to computers. So if we could reach a more stable point in the city, that would probably be the next service we would want to work towards. Looking at that, we want to look at a stair-step kind of approach, because when we kind of went all or nothing, it blew up in our face, to be frank. So we're looking at a more stair-step approach. We were thinking of opening the main computer lab only, not the whole branch, but the lab by appointment use. It's the largest lab. It's easiest to social distance. Patrons would be limited on the amount of time they could use it. They would have to agree to a temperature check and wear a mask. It has one way in, one way out. There's security in the branch. Hands-on assistance would not be possible regardless due to social distancing protocol. And as demand would increase, we could look at opening the same sort of procedure at the branches. Looking at the buildings for public use further down the line, we would obviously want to start slow again, limit the amount of time that patrons can be in the building, maybe 1 day a week for browsing or set hours for browsing. And utilize a grab and go model. That grab and go model is what Fairfax is doing right now. They're letting people come in for a 30-minute window of browsing or less and get out. And the same with their computers. You can come in, you can use, and then you have to get out. I would think that opening Main further down the line, allowing that to try that at a central location first, and then slowly phasing in possibly branches across the city until we have all of them open with this grab and go model, which would allow us to stay in curbside a bit longer and then slowly move towards that before fully functioning again. So looking at the questions from the very beginning, when can we open? We are still in phase 3. That hasn't changed across the state or the city. None of the other departments, they've made their decisions. They're not changing. Obviously, we want to continue to serve our city. But until we get out of phase 3, I don't think that will be business as usual. I mean, I just don't see it happening yet. But are we meeting community needs? What are we not meeting? How do we meet them? The modified curbside has increased circulation to around 70% of normal circulation levels across the system. And by adding in the additional services, I think that we've elevated the overall service to around 85% of like normal function. The virtual programming is continuing. We do have lots of newly planned fall programming. In youth services, they have SOL-based kits they're putting together and story times. We have virtual book clubs, bookologists helping meet those additional needs. And we are planning right now how we can add in public computer use as a service in the future. So quantifiable conditions that need to be met with the recommendations from CDC and WHO, minimum of 14 days consecutive, 5% positivity in the city of Richmond would be kind of our minimum benchmark that we would want to look at. It's important, of course, to think about high-risk patronage and staff and the nature of the library model in general of giving and taking back and having lots of highly touched areas, things like that is important to keep in mind. And what does the reopening procedure look like? Like we said, a slow approach, possibly computers at Main by appointment, and then maybe branches by appointment, then maybe setting hours at Main for people to be able to come in, then the branches, using a grab and go model and slowly phasing in branches and hours. So that is my presentation, and I am more than happy to answer questions or return to any slides people would like me to.
So I have a couple of questions. One, a comment. Adam, I love the weekly email. I think that's, I look forward to that. That's well done. But my question, and you did, Tori, you did a great job. I worry about vulnerable populations. Yes. Can you just talk to me a little bit about who, and Scott, you're allowed to talk too.
That's why I have this team here, because they're on the front line and they're dealing with the curbside and the staff. And
of course.
You've got our a dynamic group of managers here who can really represent that. So that's a good question.
I have to say, I'm wowed by all of you. You did a terrific job. But I do worry about vulnerable population, whether it's someone who needs to come in from the heat or the cold, whether it is a family that is struggling with work and teaching their children. Talk to me, and there's not a wrong answer here. Maybe we can't do everything, but who are they, and where are you happy with what we're doing, and where it's just beyond, given the pandemic, that we can do anything? No wrong answer.
So as far as the people who use our space as a space, right, which is what I think you were asking about particularly, the people who just need to be in the building because they don't have somewhere else to go, they need the public restroom, they maybe Wi-Fi, or needing to use a computer. I don't know, those different things that we can't do exactly with the door shut. My concerns, like you mentioned, a family coming in to help with the school, I would wonder what we could offer them in the building that we couldn't offer them outside the building. I mean, obviously the door's shut, we're not a cooling location. Right. There are other places in the city that are doing that, and we are moving towards cooler temperatures. As far as like where I'm located, it hasn't been as much of a concern for me. I feel personally that tends to be more representative of other branches, particularly the main branch. So maybe Natalie or Scott would have a different opinion. I'm not sure.
Corey, let me follow up on Chris's question there. And first off, I agree. Great presentation from all of y'all, wonderful research, well put together. But I do question, sort of following up on Chris's, I think one thing I'm not going to take exception to, but that I wondered about when you referred to the 85% of needs, basically. And I think we are really doing a good job there. But some branches, and I particularly think of Broad Rock, Hull Street, East End, that have a stronger after-school programs, have had a real need. Sunday, even at Broad Rock, for example, a lot of, and particularly in the Latino population, a lot of people coming in and using those kids, actually using the libraries, not just because they don't have Wi-Fi at home. The schools can obviously solve that with hotspots and things, but sort of that influence that they're getting from being in the library and people doing the work together, and librarians available even at a distance to help them. And I'm not saying we should be substituting for or filling the school's failures, but at the same time, we are seeing a real issue with some of that population anyway, and it sort of seems a shame. So when I think about a phased-in approach, one of the things I think of is, well, Maine, maybe we need to for the cooling centers, although I don't think that's as big an issue. As you said, we're going into a cooler weather for a month or two before it gets cold. But more from the young students, and particularly our Latino population, where maybe both parents are out a lot, where they're not in the same habits that even our lower income African-American communities in some areas of the city, who are used to the schooling and the working through those programs. A lot of the Hispanic kids are, the first ones in their families to have exposure to RPS and the schooling and things. And we've been part of that.
Yeah. Heather, or anyone can jump in, but Heather is our branch manager at the Broad Rock Library. And I would say that is the branch that has the most English spoken as a second language in the household. Their patronage is much higher. They have more books in that language. They have a very, very strong, in normal times, homework help program that I've been there covering because they need all hands on deck. They have multiple volunteers and 2 or 3 staff members that speak Spanish, and they can sit right there and help the kids understand the work. Primarily when I spoke to Heather about her concerns with being able to provide that help, because that is the strongest thing they do, that language barrier, and being able to help them with the homework. That is the primary thing that they spend a lot of time on. And the difficulty that she explained to me is a lot of times it's the parents understanding what is being asked of the student. The parents want to help their child. They don't understand the assignments. Right. So a lot of what we're doing there is translating what is expected and how to help with it. My concerns would be with social distancing. I don't know how much we'd be able to do that, but I can tell you that the Youth Services Department, and Heather has been a big part of our Ripples Reading Buddies, and a majority of our Ripples Reading Buddies have been from the Broad Rock Library and are people that are speaking English as a second language. We are looking at how we can do that virtually, and we do have some things in mind and some things that they're working on. It is unfortunate because I really, I have 2 small kids. My background is in education originally, early childhood development. And so this is so hard because obviously the best way to learn is in a classroom with a teacher, hands-on, manipulatives, all those sort of things. I don't know truly that opening the building will actually increase our ability to provide that. It would be the space, but I don't know that the service level would be what we want it to be.
Fair enough.
And in large part, one of the things that we've seen at East End, for example, is families that are printing things off for a child's presentation, printing things for a report that they've got to turn in. It's not so much the actual creation of those things that's going on at the branch. It's more printing off those things that they need for them. And that's something that we've been able to address with this modified curbside.
Thank you.
And the Office of Multicultural Affairs is also working with us and RPS in figuring out how we can serve English second language speaker students more during this time, because they are obviously younger children and people with IEPs and children where English is not a first language. They are going to be the most at risk with this sort of learning. So there are different things in place across the city.
You mentioned something about you have Zoom capabilities now. Would it be possible to open up Zoom rooms that they could visit, and access resources or something of that nature? I don't know if the newsletter goes out in Spanish. Is that correct? So, they would be able to, get the information.
That's one of the things that we just started building. We just were able to get a Zoom license, and Natalie Draper has been working on setting that up so patrons can come in and reserve a Zoom room, just like you would reserve a room at the library. I think your question brings to light the issue that Zoom is free for up to 40 minutes for a meeting, but that's the free version. To do a more robust meeting, you need to have the subscription license, and that's expensive. So our foundation has helped us purchase that license because we couldn't get it through the city. So we got a license for that. We've set it up, and we are in the process of setting that up. And we'll be able to offer Zoom rooms to patrons who need them. And we'll also be able to do programs on Zoom. Just like we're meeting right now with Zoom, we'll be able to do book talks or events, or I think some of you, we're learning to live on Zoom in many ways to have that connection. It's not as great a connection as being in person, which is where we'd love to get back to. But we're a long way from that. But I think Zoom will be integrated into, we're doing exactly what you just recommended. And I think Zoom is going to be ubiquitous going forward. We'll be able to have events in the future where we'll have a live event where you can show up in person once COVID-19 goes away, and we'll also be able to broadcast it. So, I keep telling everybody we're evolving library service, and some of the things we're doing now, we're going to keep doing those once we open back up. So
That's good.
I
Scott,
hope
I think
that
Gail's trying to say
I
something.
know Gail had her hand up a little earlier, but
Right.
go ahead.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. One red flag for me in Scott's and Tori's presentation is about staffing concerns. And before it gets worse, which I'm afraid it will, the General Assembly designated libraries as an essential service this year to the public and to the school public education. So I'm wondering if we could utilize that and, for human resources to maybe help fill some of these positions and override the freeze. Because really this is going to get to be a worse situation before it gets better, I'm afraid. And we need the staffing to provide these services. So I don't want to leave all of you short. You've done such a good job in pitching in so quickly.
Right,
So
Gail. And
that's
one of the tactics we've tried to use to keep our staff safe is this split staffing, where we try to, have not the whole staff together at one time, so you don't, if somebody gets an exposure, they don't wipe out the whole staff. It's difficult for us to do that because we're so short-staffed across the board. I've used that exact justification in my requisitions up the chain of command with HR. I don't know that it's helped us move them any faster, but we just keep pushing.
Need to get the governor involved, maybe. Holy cow.
Scott, in addition to Gail's question, if I may, about staffing, because you said staffing, my mind is like blew up. From a requisitions perspective, do you have a copy of or a list of what roles are outstanding that you've submitted already that are pending approval?
Right, so Mr. Sawyer, with the budget cuts we've taken, I have to prioritize public service over kind of any backroom service or administrative service. So all of the positions that I have in the pipeline are all direct service positions.
Okay.
They're all essential to running the operations of the library. They're all library technician seniors, library technicians, youth service associates who provide direct service to our patrons. One of the things that hit us last year, and this is some history that's going to kind of explain, we had a real hit to our personnel because we offered these early retirements. There was a VRIP program last fall, and we had a seasoned workforce, and many of them took that option to go ahead and retire.
Okay.
So that all hit in November of last year, and we lost about 8 full-time positions. And out of 114, 110 employees, that's a pretty significant part of your workforce that we lost. And the collective knowledge that went out the door was pretty high. So we've been, that happened in November. The crisis hit about February, March, and everything's been in a holding pattern since March. So I've got requisitions that have been in a holding pattern since March. So
Scott, one thing I wanted to mention on the HR side of things, and I think you covered the gaps we have there well, but if we go to a phased reopening, you talked about the split staff, which I think is really critical, keeping as few of our staff exposed at any one time. I'd also like to think that we have the ability, we can't do anything that's discriminatory, of course, but we can ask our staff who feels comfortable being on the front desk, who feels comfortable having more contact with the patrons. And we obviously are going to have some people who feel much less concerned than others based upon their age, based upon their living situations, who's around, and so on. So I'd like, as you think about this, not to think of, well, these are the 8 people that are assigned to this branch, and think of it more as, here's my whole pool. And if you have people who are willing to have more contact, then you may have to move those people from branch to branch a little bit more than you normally would. Does that make any sense to you?
I understand what you're trying to get at. I don't know that my job descriptions can accommodate that, and I don't know that my workflow can accommodate that. ADA has many requirements, and we have to be respectful of that, and it's a critical thing. And matching it with our job description, I don't know that I can ask those questions or make those.
No, I wasn't suggesting that we ask questions or we do anything that puts us sideways with ADA. I was thinking of it from the other perspective. We have people who we would make accommodations for under the ADA basically, but who might not, people who are more concerned about exposure and people who are less concerned. And if we have 30 people out of our 100 and whatever who say, yeah, I'm pretty comfortable. I'm not going home to people that I'm worried about infecting. I'm in that, 39 and under, very low risk age group. Are they more willing to be at those desks rather than saying, well, when we open up, we have to be safe enough that we're not worried about our 22-year-olds. We're also not worried about our 68-year-olds who are working in the library. And I'd like to think that sort of as a team, that they can work out how to shield the most, and you aren't going to force anyone onto a desk, obviously. If they feel unsafe, we're not going to say, well, you must do this. So, I don't know. Maybe it's not possible, but I would hope that the staff would consider that. So, okay. Other comments, questions?
I have a question for Tori. And I want to thank Adam and Natalie and Tori. This was a lot of good information. Tori, on one of your slides, it was your recommendation slide. I don't know if you can get to it easily.
Yes,
but I want to make sure I understand what you're recommending. And it seemed like maybe a word was missing.
Quite possible. One moment, let me get to it.
Well, it could be me, but back up one more.
This one?
Yeah, your first sentence there, looking on a smaller scale, we recommend the board votes to move to the next phase. Do you mean you want us to wait until the city has the percent positivity 5% or lower?
Yes, ma'am. My recommendation based on the research would be that we want to have a 14-day running average within the city or the greater Richmond area and have that be at 5% or less for that 14-day average before moving to the next phase of service, which in my recommendation would be starting to implement public computer use by appointment.
The next phase.
That would be, yes, ma'am.
Okay, and Natalie, I did do your survey too, so I'm one of the people who misses looking at books. Thank you.
Other questions, comments for?
Bill, could Gianna send us the slides, the PowerPoints and PDF, Tori's and
Sure.
Adam's and Natalie's?
So what I'd like to do is after this meeting, after we make a call, I would really like to, what I'm going to do is put all of this information out, the data that we've discovered, the information that you've been presented, and almost in kind of a report format, because once you all make a decision, and this was a good suggestion, is that you may get questioned on it. And I'd like you to have the information available so you can say, yeah, these were the things we looked at. This is the data we looked at. These were, this was how we came to this conclusion,
right.
Which I think would be helpful to you. And it's helpful to me because I have to explain it a lot.
Okay. Does that help, Gail?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. The questions, we want to try to wrap up fairly soon, but we do have to decide what we're going to do. We sort of said today would be our decision point. We would go to curbside only to this point. So Tori, what you're sort of suggesting, clearly suggesting, is we hold where we are with expanding the outreach somewhat until we get to 5% positivity in the city. Get below 5% for that 14-day running average. I guess my question would be, how does the board feel about that? Do we want to go with that? Does anyone think we should do that and revisit in next month's meeting? Do we want to set it for a longer period of time? Do we want to accept that as a policy for the next 3 months? I think it's fluid enough that at our last meeting, we said, well, we're going to look at this in a month, which is why we're getting together today instead of waiting until September. Thoughts?
Well, I think the idea to do a 30-day wait was a great one. And I think the goal of 5% seems in keeping with where the science is directing us. And I think we've seen what happens when we have tried, because we were in phase 3, to be able to do something different. But I definitely think waiting until we're at 5%, and then also looking at starting with Maine, where Maine is set up with, especially for the computer usage. It works much better for the public to be able to go in there for that service, and then to be able to look at what's happening in the greater community, to be able to say when would the other branches be in a position that they could do something by appointment. But your reports were also very helpful in terms of being able to think this through and to be able to see how we can move forward and give citizens an opportunity to have greater access to the library services.
Yeah, I'm really impressed with the work you all have done. This feels very solid. Tori, I just wanted, Tori or Scott, so 5% positivity would be kind of the point where we'd open up Maine computer usage. What would that, do you have any thoughts about what continuing to open up branches and other computers and grab and go, what that would look like? Or do you have a schedule for that? Or is that sort of, you would feel it out over time?
So unlike what we did in July, the beginning of July, where we moved to phase 3 and we said, let's open up, it's going to be great. And we opened up and we ran into problems. I would want to open up much more deliberately and slowly, almost like turning a dial. Instead of just like throwing open the doors and running and seeing how we do, not doing that. I think 5% positivity is a great indicator. I don't think it's the only benchmark we should use, and Tori hit upon that. I don't want us to like swing back and forth. Like on one day it's 4.5, on another day it's 5.5. Oh, we got to shut down. I don't want to do that. I think the positivity shows you the spread in the community, and that's really important. So what I would recommend is like, we see when that 5% positivity, we get below that, and then we drop something in. We add the computers, we open up the computers by appointment. We run that for 2 weeks and see how it goes. We don't have any problems. People are wearing masks. We're meeting their needs. Then after 2 weeks, we look at like, okay, let's do grab and go. So we phase in grab and go over the next 2 weeks. So we have grab and go going and computers going. We do that at Maine. There, after 4 weeks of that, we look, by the time we get to there, it's going to be late September. We can say, okay, how's it going? Then if things are going well, okay, let's try it at West End, or let's try it at East End. Let's turn the dial slowly is the way I would like to do it. I went before the meeting, I checked with Parks and Rec to find out what they're doing. They are going to be closed until October, and then they're going to slowly start opening up their buildings in October. So the community centers aren't opening. They have some things going recreation wise. I think you can schedule an appointment at the pool, at some of the indoor pools they have, like the one in Manchester. But they're not planning to do rec leagues until next year. They're going to probably open in a phased approach just like that. So in October, they'll open, they'll say, okay, 15 people can come in, and they're going to figure out how to do it as well. But they're waiting till October to do things. And what I think that's going to do is, we have a lot going on right now in this, in the city of Richmond. We got VCU coming back. We got Union coming back. We've got University of Richmond coming back, and you see how they're all responding to it. In 4 weeks, we're going to know a lot more. All the parochial and private schools are coming back. So we're going to see how that experiment worked. So, that positivity rate is kind of like the speedometer on how it's going. And I think as we move forward, we'll look at that number, but we'll also look at what's going on around us and turn that dial. That's my recommendation.
Thank you for clarifying.
Scott, one thing I would say is, when you talk about Parks and Rec and some of the other groups, a lot of, particularly Parks and Rec, I think they may have a different direction in a certain way than we do, in that they're staying closed maybe because of worried about causing community spread, whereas we're basically staying closed because we're trying to protect staff. Community spread is obviously a part of that, but I don't think anyone thinks the library is going to be a super spreader. It's more, and we closed back a month ago, or 6 weeks, whatever, because we hit that point where, we had staff members exposed and we had to shut down. We didn't have staff to run them and so on. So I do think it's important to, to sort of separate what we do versus what they do in that respect.
I'll agree. I agree with that to a certain extent. But I mean, they have similar concerns in events and stuff. We can't do events, and we do
I
have
agree
people,
completely on that.
One event coming up and not too far distant future is the election day. How many branches are precincts?
we only have the main library as a precinct, and we opened up East End for a precinct. They were an emergency precinct back in June. I don't think they're going to continue that because the space is too small. I think they're going to go back to that church. At least that's what the registrar is telling us. But the main library will be a precinct, and that will be a challenge to navigate. But we'll be closed that day because the mayor now closes. He closes the city now for election day. So that won't be a problem for our staff. No. Now, I don't know where we're going to be at come November, but I don't know that that'll be as big of a challenge for us. It'll be more of a challenge for the voter registrar and the for her.
And security.
Okay. Yeah, and security. Yep.
They'll have to split it out through the building. The primary was handled very well, but obviously the turnout for that isn't going to be anywhere near the November turnout. So I think they'll probably be able to take advantage of the rest of the building without being closed, but they won't be too much of a problem.
Yeah, I could see them wrapping it all the way through our first floor and out the building.
Yeah.
And that was honestly why they backed off with East End as well. They said that there's not enough space in the building for them to be able to space it out the way they would need to with the anticipated foot traffic.
Other thoughts before we decide today, take a quick vote on following the recommendations that Tori put out there and the rest of the team? Any other questions before we do that? Okay, I'm going to suggest, I don't think we need to have a formal motion because we're on a Zoom call here. Am I right about that, Jonna?
You have to, if you're going to do a motion, you have to call.
Do we need to do my question is, do we need to actually do a motion about this, or can we just say, okay, let's talk about it and have a consensus agreement? Do we actually have to make a motion and phrase it and put it in that way?
If you don't change anything, it can be a consensus.
Okay.
If you change something, you need a motion.
Okay. I'd like to suggest that by consensus, we agree to go forward still with curbside delivery and the increasing services under that until we hit 5% for 14 days or lower, 5% or lower for 14 days in the city, at which point I think we'd like to probably what we should do at that point is just have an impromptu notice of a Zoom call and do a quick vote on what those exact next steps will be then as to which branches, get the computer access initially and so on. Does that sound fair? Okay. Then let's run through that. Let me grab my list again. I think that's what we should do. Emily, you okay with that?
Yes.
Barbara?
Yes, I am.
Sharon?
Yes.
Brent? Let's skip over Brent. We may have lost him for a minute. Chris?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, just heard Brent. Okay, Garrett?
Yes.
And Janet?
Yes.
Okay, and Gail?
Yes.
Okay, so let's go forward with that. I think there's great information that was given to us today. I think that's a reasonable plan. I'm really impressed with the staff's level of service they've been able to achieve.
Bravo.
And we're hearing great things from people. It's, obviously our concern is we don't want to be in this any longer than we have to, but we also want to keep our patrons and our staff safe. So before we adjourn, let me just mention that next month we're going to make committee selections. In addition to the committee selections and their chairs, we need to select a vice chair. And if people have any desire for a different chair, I'm very open to that. I'm fine. Over the next month, though, I'd like you to think about where you can do the most for the board. And if you have questions about that, feel free to contact me about what the committees do, what kind of skills fit best with them. We may even call upon David, who I think, yeah, we still have David.
Yeah.
Yeah, that we may even ask him for some of his wisdom, just as a no longer board member, but as a real experienced hand in that. So if you have any questions on either one of those, feel free to contact us. And we're on that emailing that you see it. You'll see my email in that. If you don't, just call John and she can get it to you. I wanted to mention that Janet suggested at the last meeting for new business, and it didn't get in there, that we take Juneteenth a little more into account this coming year in 2021, when we don't have, hopefully won't have the COVID issues and so on. And Scott informed me that that was already in the works. We're planning that, right, Scott? Okay. And finally, I wanted to mention that more than a year ago, year and a half, whatever ago, our prior chair started what I would sort of say was a little mini book club component for the board in our meetings. And we have, as a group, read and discussed two books, Palaces for the People and Evicted. And I think we now have two more upcoming books that we'd be interested in. The VCU read this year, One Person, No Vote, and one which I thought might be interesting given our politically charged time and the controversies out there, Jonathan Haidt's The Righteous Mind, How Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. Jonna has already ordered copies of The Righteous Mind, and they are going to go out to each of you in the next month or so, next week or so. And I don't have my copy. I passed it along to someone already. So I can't remember exactly where good break points are in that, but maybe in either September, October meeting, we can discuss some of the things in the early chapters of that book. As to time permitting, of course. And other than that, I'm just going to open up for any other new business, anything else anyone feels we need to discuss quickly. Nope. Okay, I don't think we need a motion to adjourn as we're Zoom one. Gianna, correct me if I'm wrong.
You're correct.
Okay, so we are done for today. Thank you all for joining. So glad to have our new members and look forward to talking to you at the next meeting, if not before. And that next meeting is on September 23rd. Wait a minute, September 23rd. Okay, thank you all.
Be safe, all.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.